Well, hello, friends. I hope you're having a great day today. You know what? I believe that God has good things in store for you today. I really do. I'm not just saying that. That's the God that we serve. He always has great things in store for His people. If you'll just trust Him and just obey His commands and follow the steps that He lays out for you, man, I'm telling you, God will do great things in your life and bring sure victory to you in everything this day. Hey, well, welcome to Thursday's edition of Take 5. This week we are talking about the message that I preached on Sunday. That message was entitled, The Power of One. In this message, we are learning how God will absolutely just use one person to change a situation, to turn it in completely around. God doesn't have to have groups, although He will use groups, but God will use one, and He has done it so many times throughout the Scriptures. And I believe that we're at a point where God wants to use you. He wants you to be the one that He can depend on, the one that He can use to change the world right where you are, and quite possibly even today. I want to read our text from 1 Samuel chapter 17, not all of it. I just want to read about the last 4 verses just to remind us of what's going on. Because we're talking about David and Goliath and how the battle between these two men, one-on-one, represents this idea that we're talking about this week. So here we go in 1 Samuel 17:8. Goliath stood and shouted to the ranks of Israel, "Why have you come out to draw up for battle? Am I not a Philistine, and are you not servants of Saul? Choose a man for yourselves, and let him come down to me. If he's able to fight with me and kill me, then we will be your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then you shall be our servants and serve us." And the Philistines said, "I defy the ranks of Israel this day. Give me a man that we may fight together." And when Saul and all Israel heard these words of the Philistine, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. You know, I believe that's where many in the church are today. When you see it, army against army, good against evil, Israel against the Philistines, when you see that, there's really not as much fear as you see in the life of Saul and these when Goliath calls them out one-on-one. Because Saul and all of Israel know that they've already beaten the Philistines one time, beat them so bad that the Philistines would not even step foot in Israelite territory. But something is different now. Goliath calling them out one-on-one is not setting well with Saul and the rest of the Philistines, and the Israelites. And I believe that that's where many in the church are today. In this meeting between David and Goliath, one man is going to decide the future of these nations, either Goliath or David. Now, the devil is doing all that he can to use this pagan giant to take the whole group out of the picture and reduce it down to one man, because he thinks the size and the stature of Goliath will so terrify the Israelites that no one will come out there and fight. But the devil didn't plan on David showing up that day, because David wasn't concerned about the size of the giant, because David was very familiar with the size of his God, and he knew that God could take one and turn this situation around. Now, in order to be this one that God can use, you got to have some things together in your life. The first thing we talked about yesterday, and that is perspective. Having the right perspective is to recognize that there is a problem. There absolutely is a problem, but you also know there is a solution, and that solution is God. Secondly, you've got to have purpose. When you have purpose, that means that there is a reason and a need for you to respond. Not just a reason to respond, but a need for you to respond as well. And that's exactly what David knew when he heard Goliath shouting out all of that defiant speech against the Lord's army. He knew that there was a reason to respond. As a matter of fact, this is how the Bible records it. David's oldest brother Eliab heard when he spoke to the men, and his anger was aroused against David, and he said, "Why did you come down here?" And with whom have you left those few sheep in the wilderness? Let me tell you something, friend. When you decide that you're willing to be the one, you better know you will have some repercussions. There will be some people that don't think that you're being very wise in doing that. Why did you come down here? He said, I know your pride and the insolence of your heart, for you have come down to see the battle. David responded and said, what have I done now? Is there not a cause? Or David said, there's a purpose. There's a reason and a need for someone to respond. And he said, and I'm ready to do it if no one else is. That's what you've got to have. You've got to know that there is purpose. There is a reason and a need to respond if you're going to be that one that is going to affect change. Third on our list, you must have the right persuasion. Persuasion is to be convinced by past experiences that what God did, He still does. And if you want to be that one that is going to affect change in your part of the world, you've got to know that God's still God today. Nothing's changed about Him. He's able to still do today what He's always done. And can I go ahead and tell you, He's able to do some things we've never seen Him do. That's how persuaded you've got to be. When word was carried to King Saul that David wanted to fight this giant, he called him in and they had a conversation. I want to read that to you. When the words that David spoke were heard, they reported them to Saul and he sent for him. And David said to Saul, let no man's heart fail him because of this giant. Your servant will go and fight with this Philistine. And Saul said to David, you're not able to go. This Philistine is a man of war since his youth, and you're just a very young man. David said to Saul, your servant used to keep his father's sheep, and when a lion or a bear came and took a lamb out of the flock, I went out after it and struck it and delivered the lion from its mouth. And when it arose against me, I caught it by the beard and struck it and killed it. Your servant has killed both lion and bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, seeing he has defied the armies of the living God. Moreover, David said, the Lord that delivered me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine. And Saul said, go, and the Lord be with you. David knew that what God had done in his past, He was able to do even now. And he was persuaded that God was more than enough. And so he chose to put his trust and his faith in Him. Friend, that is all you've got to do. If you've got the right perspective, if you've got the right purpose, if you've got the right persuasion, you can be the one, just like David, that can affect change in the world around you. Well, hey, I got to get out of here. It's been good being with you today. I look forward to being with you tomorrow on Friday's edition of Take 5. Until then, God bless you. Have a great and glorious day, friend, and make yourself ready, because today could be the day that God chooses you to be the one to make change in the world.